This is Sam Magavern from the Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites 276 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. Delighted to be joining you every Tuesday at 7 p.m. here on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM. Today we'll be joined by Robert Galbraith from the Public Accountability Initiative. He'll be talking about some of his recent research on some of Buffalo's most powerful figures, developers, politicians, institutions. You'll learn about how to do your own power research as well. Don't forget to follow PPG on Facebook and Twitter, and of course you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. The Public Good is sponsored in part by Univera Healthcare, real people who really care. You can find video from the show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ppgbuffalo, and you can find videos from previous week's shows on our YouTube channel. Before we get started with Rob, I've got a few quick announcements for you. This coming Monday, April 23rd, there will be a march on the state capitol from New York Renews. They'll be demanding action to fight climate change, create good jobs, and ensure justice for all. For details on the march and the rally, go to New York Renews Facebook page. PPG is going to be going on that bus trip. It's going to be, I'm sure, quite a day in Albany with the New York Renews campaign, so check that out. April 25th at 5:30, the League of Women Voters is presenting a panel discussion on gentrification. There'll be an expert professor from Cleveland State University who will be discussing gentrification, and then there'll be a panel that will include me, a local developer, some other activists, and should be a very interesting discussion of gentrification. That is April 25th at 5:30 at the Downtown Public Library. You can check out the League of Women Voters Facebook page for that event. Also want to let you know about an interesting resource from our friends at Push Buffalo. If you've ever been interested in the idea of buying a lot or a property from the city's tax foreclosure auction, they will be doing a workshop on how to do that April 25th at 6 p.m. You can look at Push Buffalo's event page to learn more about that. All right, with that, I want to welcome Rob Galbraith from Public Accountability Initiative to the show. Public Accountability Initiative does research on powerful corporations and government entities on behalf of the public. A local nonprofit does a lot of work on Buffalo, but also a lot of national work as well. We're lucky to have them here. And Rob, great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam.
So you recently broke a really big story. It ended up on the front page of the Buffalo News, so I want to start by asking you about that. Tell us what your research revealed about a local developer, Sinatra Real Estate, and their tax issues.
Sure. So, yeah, we looked into local records for 79 properties owned by 20 different LLCs controlled by Sinatra and Company. And we found that as of April 5th this year, Sinatra owed taxes on at least 42 of those properties, totaling at least $827,000.
That's a large amount of money to be owing in taxes. So that's local property taxes that he was owing on?
Yeah, that's right. It was property taxes to the city of Buffalo, as well as sewer rent to the city of Buffalo, and late fees for not having paid them, as well as property taxes to Erie County, as well as some special assessments for buildings in the downtown area, which has an additional tax levy for the Buffalo Place Business District.
And Sinatra, that's a name that people have probably seen on signs around the city. They own a lot of different properties. What are some of the ones that folks might kind of recognize or be aware of?
Right. Yeah. So Sinatra has become, one of the largest landlords in the city of Buffalo in Western New York in a relatively short amount of time. Some of the properties we looked at include the Market Arcade building downtown, which is a historic structure that used to be owned by the city and was sold to Sinatra in 2014. Other sort of notable projects that he's done have been the Phoenix Brewery Apartments, a luxury apartment conversion on the medical campus, as well as several buildings on the corner of Main and Ferry. He's also, embarking on some actually new construction projects, including the redevelopment of the Women and Children's Hospital site in the Elmwood Village.
So you found out that their company owed, or different companies owed about $800,000 in local taxes. And the Buffalo News then ran a big front page story on it. What happened next?
Well, I guess as they reached out to Sinatra for comment, he pledged that he would pay all of his past due taxes back by April 20th. That's this coming Friday. What we've seen already is that he has come into action. He's started paying his taxes back. Sinatra's response to our findings was that he didn't pay the taxes because he didn't think that it was fair for him to have to pay them. He said he was challenging the assessments on those properties, saying that essentially the government was charging him too much in property taxes. That doesn't quite add up. The county has said that they're unaware of any challenges, so it's not really clear when he was planning on actually making these challenges, and whether he would have paid these taxes at all if no one had pointed it out.
And when you challenge the assessments, anyone's allowed to challenge the assessment on their property tax. If you own a house and you get your notice of assessment and they tell you how much your taxes will be, you have the right to challenge that. But you do have to pay your taxes in the meantime, right? It's not like you can say, "Oh no, that's not fair. I'm not going to pay them."
Right. Just because you don't agree with the amount that you're being charged doesn't mean that you just don't have to pay it. You have to pay them while you're challenging those assessments. And another sort of issue here is that on several of these properties, he's owned them for several years as well. And some of these back taxes go back all the way to 2016. So again, it's not really clear what the issue it was with actually making these challenges, or whether whether that explanation was trying to cover for something else, whether he is having cash flow issues, which would certainly be understandable considering the huge amount of properties that he's accumulated, since he really got started in 2011.
Now, when you don't pay your taxes, when you're late, they charge you pretty steep interest and penalties, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, if beyond just the interest that you're charged, they'll actually foreclose on your properties. And the city of Buffalo has a really large foreclosure auction every year where they sell off hundreds of properties, or at least put them up for auction, that where folks have not paid taxes or sewer rents or user fees.
Right.
And what we found actually is that in the city of Buffalo, at least 14 of Sinatra's properties, foreclosure proceedings had already been initiated on them, including the Market Arcade, which is where his business is headquartered. We also found that one of his properties was actually already sold at the 2017 tax foreclosure auction.
Oh, so one of them actually did go into foreclosure all the way and get sold at the auction.
Yeah, that's right.
So what was the city's response to the fact when the news broke that all this money was owed to them?
Well, the city confirmed that yes, this money is owed. Yes, foreclosure proceedings have been initiated, but they did not seem altogether concerned about it. To the Buffalo News, the city expressed confidence that Sinatra would make the payments that he owes on these properties, and pointed out that as far as the city is concerned, he's a civic-minded developer, and that they have every confidence in him.
Now, the Public Accountability Initiative, what kind of stirs your interest in this? Why should the public care if a developer is behind on his taxes? What's sort of the public interest in a matter like this?
Well, I mean, for one thing, tax revenues are what we rely on to, provide all manner of public services. The county uses it to pave roads. The city uses it as well. When you have this large amount of money, being withheld by a person who has access to large amounts of capital, it illustrates how the powerful people with political power and lots of money essentially are playing by a different set of rules. People who are behind on their taxes in as little and as small amount as I think like $250, have had their homes and their businesses sold out from under them at the tax foreclosure auction. Here we have a developer owing hundreds of thousands of dollars on dozens of properties around the region, and really so far has not seen consequences. I mean, aside from being named in the public or being named in the Buffalo News and having to actually pay what he owes.
Yeah, well, it seems like your work had a very immediate effect in that suddenly he promised to pay all the taxes by April 20th. So it seems like you got a very quick response. So
yeah, and we're looking forward to April 20th. Which is Sinatra's self-imposed deadline to see, is he going to provide some, evidence to the public that he has paid everything back, and some sort of assurance that, going forward that he will continue to pay his taxes, especially as he, avails himself of all kinds of public subsidies and, special tax breaks.
Right, and you've done some work in the past, and you did some as part of this report into the amount of public money that goes into some of these private developments, and you've done that with the development community in general in Buffalo, but you also looked at Sinatra's properties in particular. So what are some of the tax incentives that a big developer like Sinatra is able to obtain? I mean,
one thing right out the back, and maybe probably the best known one is through the Erie County Industrial Development Agency, people planning different projects can apply for tax breaks or mortgage tax breaks on the mortgage tax and sales tax breaks in like actually buying the materials and services to do a development project. We found that Sinatra's received at least $1.47 million in mortgage and sales tax breaks for 5 projects through the ECIDA, including for one project that he got this this money from the ECIDA during the time when his taxes were delinquent.
Now is that allowed? Are you allowed to get tax incentives when you're behind on your taxes?
No, you're not. That is I don't know exactly when the policy was passed by the ECIDA. That hasn't always been the policy, but as of 2017, that if you were behind on your taxes, you can't get additional tax breaks on top of that. Right. But in addition to the ECIDA tax breaks, Sinatra's also availed himself of the 45A tax exemption, which it's meant to incentivize the adaptive reuse of formerly non-residential properties to turn them into mixed-use developments.
So like when you convert a warehouse or an old factory into apartments and stores?
Exactly. And we found that Sinatra has obtained that 4 times so far on properties assessed at a total of $5.8 million rather. It's because of the way that is calculated. I'm not sure exactly what the actual benefit to him of that tax break is, but it exempts a large portion of your property taxes over a span of 12 years from when you obtain it. So it's a very significant tax break.
And so I guess a part of your point in tracing these is to say that the public is actually investing in these developments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through tax incentives, he's able to access public money that helps him do these deals. So the public has more than a sort of abstract stake in what happens with them and whether he's up on his taxes and the nature of those developments and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this isn't just numbers on an account balance somewhere. I mean, this is real material resources that are being withheld from the city as the city. As the city and the county and the public in turn award him by like you said investing in his projects.
Now you've also looked at who invests in his properties and also sort of some of the interrelationship of politics and development, the ways that developers like Sinatra give money to politicians for their election campaigns, and the way some politicians are direct investors in his properties or people connected with politics. So explain that to us a little bit. How is Sinatra development entangled with different political figures?
Well, I mean, Nick Sinatra himself is a major Republican fundraiser locally for both the local Republican officials as well as nationwide figures. So one person, for example, the person probably most closely tied to to Sinatra, at least financially, that holds public office is Congressman Chris Collins, who represents the 27th District of New York. Collins is invested in several Sinatra projects, apartments in Cheektowaga, a business park up in Wheatfield, as well as some of Sinatra's other projects in Southern California and in the Chicago area. He's also lent Sinatra a good amount of money. I'm not sure what the figure is offhand. I don't have it in front of me, but he's lent the company a large amount of money too, and this is all available in Collins' personal financial disclosures that he has to make because he's a member of Congress.
And does that raise any issues for you at Public Accountability Initiative when elected officials investing in a big real estate developer?
I mean, it's certainly out of the ordinary. It's not what you traditionally see. I mean, anytime you have this sort of blend of public and private incentives and possibly priorities with a politician, it starts to raise questions about whose interests are they working for at any given time. Yeah.
What's the connection of Sinatra and Palladino?
So Sinatra and I guess going farther back to 2010, Sinatra worked on Palladino's gubernatorial campaign when he ran against Andrew Cuomo. More recently, they've worked together on a couple different projects. On one public project at 722 West Delavan, the conversion of a former Buffalo Public Schools building into apartments. Palladino's company, I should say, Ellicott Development and Sinatra and Company are also partners on the Women and Children's Hospital site redevelopment.
And how about President Trump? Any connections there with Sinatra?
Yeah. So along with several other local Republican fundraisers and members of the business community, Sinatra was a host of a fundraiser for Trump's inauguration committee.
Yeah.
Shortly after the election, I think on January 5th, 2017.
Now, one thing that strikes me when I looked through your report on who he gives money to is that it's mostly Republicans, and that he's been very active in Republican politics. But there are a number of Democrats there too. So it seems like with many developers, when they give money, they give to both sides of the aisle. And something tells me that it's not just because they think those elected officials are doing a great job. What do you read into it when developers are giving money on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as you get down to the local level, party affiliation tends to matter less, and it's I think it's really about I think if you have a lot of money, if you're a political donor, you tend to reward the politicians that are serving your interests. In the case of Sinatra, local governmental officials have been very more than willing to help him kind of amass his empire of properties. Voting for subsidies through the IDA. He's been designated the developer for a really large proposed project along Jefferson Avenue. So, yeah, I mean it's impossible to look at any donation and say this is a quid pro quo, and I mean it's. I think even though that maybe the popular idea doesn't exactly work like that, but when you are a powerful developer, when you have real estate interests and interests that can be impacted by the people in government at any particular time. I think it makes good business sense. Sinatra said that not paying his taxes was a business strategy. I think in the sort of the same way, I think rewarding politicians that are helping you achieve your ends is also good business.
Yeah, and of course, one of our most powerful local developers, LP Simonelli, the head of that, Lou Simonelli, is under indictment for essentially buying access to power or a pay-to-play scheme where campaign contributions were rewarded with a contract for Solar City. So certainly an issue that people in Buffalo should be paying close attention to is this nexus of big developers giving money to politicians, and then, at least in some cases, in the allegations in the Simonelli case, which show that they're getting rewarded, illegally, essentially. So certainly an area of concern for anyone interested in good government. Well, for folks out there who are interested in doing their own research along the lines that you do, Rob, trying to analyze how decisions get made and where people have power and how they connect to each other. Tell us a little bit about some of the tools that you all make available.
Sure. So, in addition to, conducting original research, writing reports like this one we've just been discussing, PAI runs a research tool called Little Sis. That's at littlesis.org. That is it's a user-driven database of powerful people and organizations that's used to track the relationships between those people and organizations. So, the idea of Little Sis is that it's the opposite of Big Brother, where, it is all, it's the people kind of collectively working together to kind of look back up at those in power and hold their relations up under a microscope. It's free to use. Anyone can use it, and PAI actually does monthly trainings on how to use Little Sis via webinars, as well as kind of more in-depth trainings on how to do the type of research that we do, which we call power research.
And so a lot of it's focused on elected leaders and their webs of influence, but you also do corporate research on some of the big corporations in the country. Right. And you had a big victory recently with one of Buffalo's biggest business entities, the Pegula family.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what you discovered about their operations and how it led to some fast change.
Yeah, absolutely. So in just over the border in Potter County, Pennsylvania, where Pegula's drilling company, JKLM Energy, has a lot of fracking wells, they were running into a problem where in order to dispose of this the wastewater from their fracking operations, they were having to load it into trucks and ship it to Ohio or West Virginia, where it's legal to just pump it into old abandoned oil or gas wells as a disposal method. That's not permitted in Pennsylvania, and so they were running up big bills for this, and so they decided they needed some sort of new option, and they approached the local government there, and working with a company called Epiphany Water Solutions, proposed to build an experimental wastewater treatment plant that would treat the fracking water from Pegula's wells and then discharge it into the headwaters of the Allegheny River.
Wow.
This was met with pretty strident opposition. Once the actual plan kind of became well known, it was met with pretty strident opposition, both from folks living in the area around Coudersport, but also from the Seneca Nation, whose Allegheny territory straddles the Allegheny River, which in the Seneca language is called Ohio. The river run. The Seneca Allegheny territory straddles the river there, and so the Seneca Nation was really working with folks in Pennsylvania to lead opposition here. We did some research that just sort of highlighted the kind of corporate relationships at play there, as well as the response from the founder of Epiphany, who used some really ugly, racist language to attack the Seneca Nation for their opposition. We published a story about that, I want to say 2 weeks ago, and shortly thereafter, Pegula announced that they were pulling out of the project, and they were going to be the project's pretty much sole customer. But from what we found, it also appeared that they were also actually financially investing in the project as well. So when they pulled out of the project, it basically killed it. And then shortly thereafter, the local government terminated their relationship with Epiphany and pulled their permit applications to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection to run the plant.
Well, that's quite a victory. So congratulations on that. But it's amazing how sometimes you are able to get change just by exposing the truth about different things. It seems like a lot of your work, that's kind of all you do. It's not like you're necessarily out there picketing or organizing. Sometimes I know you work with people who do that, but sometimes it seems like you're able to get change just by finding out stuff and publicizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the sort of core philosophies underpinning the work that we do is that research plays or can play and ought to play a very significant role in organizing for change. I mean, in the case of this water plant, I think what it really took for the activists to manage to stop it was to highlight that this project was being underwritten by a public figure in New York who has a very high profile and who has done a lot of work to sort of clean his image and sort of detach his public face from the fracking industry where he originally got his money from. So by highlighting the fact that Pegula is still in the fracking business, he planned this this plant that threatened the water supply and the native sovereignty of the Seneca Nation. I think just by making that connection apparent to people, we can really do a lot for change.
And I guess that was sort of a classic example where there were people on the ground organizing. There were the Seneca Nation. There were people who were opposing it, and it was that combination of organizing plus research that turned the tide.
Right, absolutely. I didn't mean to overstate our role in it.
No, that was me. But it seemed like you played a crucial role there, which is great. So again, for folks who are interested, not just in seeing how Public Accountability Initiative does its research and reading their reports, but also for being able to do it yourself, the littlesis.org website is a really powerful tool. I know I use it. If I just want to know who donates to different politicians' campaigns, I use Little Sis. It's kind of the quickest, easiest way out there just to find that. But then you find yourself learning more, immediately and finding out what boards do people sit on, who are they connected with, and starting to understand better how decisions get made, who holds power, how they influence each other. It really is a terrific resource that I urge folks to check out. And again, Little Sis does monthly trainings, monthly webinars that you can find out if you go to their website, and I'm sure follow them on social media would be helpful. So, Rob, what do you think is next for the Sinatra? We've just got a minute left here, but what are the next developments now that he's saying he's going to pay it all by April 20th? Are there still some questions that you have?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the biggest one is, is he going to show us receipts on April 20th to demonstrate that he's, paid off, and not only the taxes that he owes, on the properties that we identified, but when everything is held by a different LLC, it can be hard to get a full understanding.
You might miss some.
Yeah, so will Sinatra pay off all the taxes that he owes on all of his properties? And then, what's going to happen with his subsidies? Is he going to, once he pays these off, presuming he does, will he still have access to these same subsidies? And then, if so, what incentive does he have not to do it again? So it'll be interesting to see not just how Sinatra responds to this, but also to our elected officials as well.
What their response is. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob Galbraith from Public Accountability Initiative, for being on The Public Good. Next week on The Public Good, we'll be speaking with Doug Funke. He's from Citizens for Regional Transit. We'll be talking about all the public transit issues facing Western New York. It's The Public Good every Tuesday at 7 p.m. here on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM, and Facebook Live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Thank you.